Hello, welcome to Module 15, Lesson 4. Social Unrest is our lesson for today. The big idea: Protestants and Catholic reformations caused tremendous political and social unrest throughout Europe. Why this lesson matters is because nation states that rose as a result of the Protestant Reformation became many of the leading countries in Europe today. So we're going to study the history of the European countries of today, such as Germany, France, and also Italy. So let us first look at the setting stage. Religious turmoil increased after the Protestant and Catholic Reformations. Now, before I start explaining or reading the lesson, the difference between the Catholics and the Protestants, both are Christian, but the Catholics believe in church and Bible. Not the Bible alone, the church has to be involved. Meanwhile, the Protestants believe only in the Bible, and this distinguishment made lots of wars and issues between the two groups. So let us continue. I'll be here. I have it the same as in your book. Okay. Catholics persecuted non-Catholics and non-Catholics persecuted Catholics. So basically, the Catholics killed the Protestants and the Protestants killed the Catholic. They forgot that they are all Christian. So as well as one another, Catholics and Protestants also together did something awful, which is the persecution of Jews and Muslim and other non-Christian religious groups. Those who did not convert to Catholicism were forced out of parts of Europe, which was disastrous. So basically, we're going to speak about religious wars here and how the reformation of European countries happened. So, the social and political impact. The Catholic Reformation, I'm here. The Catholic Reformation affected the whole world. Although the Roman Catholic Church continued to take measures to stop the spread of Protestantism, it was no longer the only religious authority in Europe. Still, and policies influenced governments and societies where the church existed. So basically, the church used to be very rich, very wealthy, but the Protestants usually were the religion and the pathway for the peasants. Meanwhile, the Catholicism was for the kings and the queens and the royals and the monarchs, the rich and wealthy. So that's how the distinguish was made. But what the Catholics were fearing is that the Protestantism is going to be spreading everywhere and it's going to cancel them as Catholics. And this means that the peasants are going to flip over the system against the monarchs and the royal families. And this is what they feared the most. So they did their best to stop that. How they did their best is by something called the Inquisition. Now what is that? To fight Protestantism, the Catholic Church established a church court called the Roman Inquisition in 1542. Now, this terminology is going to represent something that is way disastrous. The main purpose of the Inquisition was to impose religious uniformity, which means to stop people from leaving Catholicism and force them to join it again, especially on converted Jews and Muslims, and later on Protestants. So the Roman Inquisition used harsh methods, including torture, to force a confession and punish heresy or a denial of church teachings. The Inquisition tried people who were accused of being Protestants, of practicing witchcraft, or of breaking church law. So basically, the Inquisition was a form of torturing people, whether you're Jew, Muslim, Protestant, practicing witchcraft. It's all the same. If you're not Catholic, you're a bad person, you deserve the Inquisition, you deserve torture. This is how they controlled the situation and found it the best way to maintain the society as how they wanted. So, the Inquisition torture. During the Inquisition, torture was not uncommon. This scene depicts the type of torture that was used. Sometimes it could be an effective tool. Many people resented their Protestant beliefs under torture. So let's see here. This is how they used to torture people, which is unfair. So let us continue. In Spain, Muslims called Moors. So when I say the Moors, I'm referring to the Muslims who live in Spain. Controlled most of the country until 1100, and in 1492, the Christian army conquered the last Muslim kingdom in Spain at Granada, which is Granada. So now we're going to see how the Muslims are involved in all of this regarding the Inquisition torture. So Muslims are in Spain. They are called Moors. And then the last Muslim kingdom was Granada and 1492. So they lasted for like 300 years or whatsoever. Then Spanish monarchs Fernand and Isabella, these are the royal family, they used an inquisition to increase their power. So they wanted to make people fearful and scared, and it was a way of them to control them. So they used the Inquisition. And 1492, I'm here. Jews and in 15th century Muslim were first to convert to Catholic Christianity or leave Spain to go to exile. Like, you are either going to convert now, ditch your religion, ditch your Shahada, ditch your Torah, and be a Catholic in front of us where we can baptize you in the church, or you're going to be leaving. And if they didn't leave, they were going to kill them. So many Jews resettled in the Eastern and the Southern Europe. This is how the Jew started to gain their own power low-key, where after being excluded from Spain and kicked, they started to reform their own societies in the Eastern and the Southern of Europe. The majority of the Jews who had earlier converted to Christianity and who were members of the educated elite stayed in Spain. And many of the areas in Europe where Jews were allowed to stay, they were not as restricted as they had been during the Middle Ages. However, some places forced them to live in a particular part of the city called the ghetto. So the ghettos were walled and their gates closed at a certain time each evening. That's how the Jew kept the community very close, very hidden. So, in time accounts of torture and executions by the the church image, and the Inquisition actions during the Catholic Reformation are still seen as an abuse of the church power. Of course, the history has recorded that the Catholics have abused their power as a church and as religious people because they tortured everyone who opposed their pathway and their perspectives. So that was regarding the Inquisition and the social political impact. Now we're going to see the witchcraft trials. Across Europe, many people feared that witches roamed the land, killing children and cattle and working with the devil. Their fears increased in times of poor harvest or other hardships. The fears inspired hysteria, in which accused witches were rounded up and tried for their alleged wrongdoing. So, suddenly, there was a mass hysteria that the witches are everywhere. They are the ones who are killing the children, the cattle, that they're working with the devil, and this made people even get crazier and crazier during these times. So the penalty for practicing witchcraft at this time was often death, and many innocent victims were executed of alleged witchcraft. And the majority of the executions of witchcraft occurred between 1580 and 1660. Thousands of people, most of them women, not men, women, or poor, were killed. Now, this doesn't make sense. Yes, there were witches, but people started to exaggerate. And the Catholics used it as an opportunity to do the Inquisitions somehow, but this time they were targeting women, and not only women, also the poor. Oh, she's the woman holding a book. Oh, then she's a witch. Bring her here. Let's burn her alive, and let's execute her. So that was regarding the witchcraft trials, and again, the witchcraft was a crime, and the penalty for it was actually death or execution. And it was mostly women and the poor who were accused. And what else? That's it for the witches' trials. Now let's go to the political effect. A rising sense of national identity was interwoven with a decline in the power of the Catholic Church. Now we're going to see a scenario where the Catholic Church, after all the endeavors and efforts they tried, they're going to be cancelled. How they're going to be cancelled? It's years later when people started to wake up to their wrongdoings. Like, what is the Catholic Church is doing? The Catholic Church is not worshiping God and calling for freedom and religion. They're actually doing the opposite. They're killing the witches for accusing them of working with the devil. But the people who are actually doing the evil works were the Catholic Church by killing everyone who's opposing them. Remind you that the Catholic people believed that they were chosen by God. It was a belief system to them. So the Protestant Reformation, now we have the Catholic Reformation, where the Catholics wanted the society to be Catholics, and then we have the Protestant Reformations, where they wanted the society to be Protestants. Mind you that the Protestants called for religion, but they called also for freedom. The Catholics, they called for religion, but in torturing everyone and not calling for any freedom. This is the right way. This is the entire thing. So, the Protestant Reformations were indirect. It didn't happen like in daytime. No, they did it low key, secretly, indirectly, and it encouraged the formation of independent states and nations. So people started to become Protestants, but they're by their own way, okay, not like publicly. Rulers and merchants both wanted the church to be less involved in state and business affairs, which they sought to control on their own. So the Catholic Church did not only wanted to control people, but wanted to control businesses. And of course, the wealthy merchants didn't like it. So church, go away. We want to do our own business, and you cannot be involved in that political alignments. So let's continue. Political power became separated from churches. Finally, when we say political power became separated, it means people had a voice to vote, and the Catholic Church is not going to be involved in everything. They're going to give people space here after being cancelled. So, although nations and churches often align themselves with one another to increase their own influence in a region, as a result, modern nation states, okay, this is like what was formed after the Catholic Church was cancelled, the nation states or the Protestant states began to emerge. So more Protestant free people started to show up with their own independent governments and populations united by shared culture, language, and national pride and love, yada yada. Nation states such as Spain and Portugal would extend their power in the 16th century. So, this is how the Catholic Church started to lose its power once it got separated from the political effects. Okay, that was regarding the social and political impact. Now we will go to the religious wars and the unrest. Trade, which had begun to flourish during the Renaissance, better connected regions of Europe through extensive trade routes and trading partners in the East: Italy, England, France, and Germany. Okay, here are the countries that we're going to speak about right now. Specialized in making certain products and traded for products they could not produce. For example, Italy can make, let's say, chocolate. England is going to trade tea that Italy cannot make. France is going to trade macarons. Germany can only trade sourdoughs, for example. So, through trade, ideas spread and daily life improved. So, when people traded with each other, all these European countries traded together, their ideas and their way and their perspective of life started to be better. Okay, so in the years after Luther published the 95 Theses, religious wars erupted within and between the countries of Europe. So, after this guy Luther, who's Luther? Luther is a theologist, he's basically a pastor, a churchman, a scholar. He is the guy who wrote this manual, this 95 Theses, this pamphlet or book or script that actually caused chaos that made Italy fight with England and fight with England against France and Spain and fights with Germany, fights with the entire European scene was a chaos because of this guy. So, those wars change historic alliances, pitting countries against each other that had fought together in the Crusades. Now, let us look at Italy. What happened to Italy? Oh, Italy. In 1994, King Charles VII of France, what did he do? He wanted to invade Italy. He was so jealous of Italy. And he had so much power and wealth. So, of course, he decided to invade Italy. This began a series of wars which France and Spain lead of control of the Italian peninsula. During the Italian wars, control of Italy bounced between these two powers, between France and Spain. France says, I want Italy. Spain says, no, it's mine. France says, no. Spain says, no. Then someone else joins the scene. England also eventually became involved. So England joined, but England was in alliance with Italy against Spain and France. England and France and Spain hated each other so much. Each one of them had a monarch's families, and they all wanted to prove that they're the best. So, although eventually became involved, as did several popes, the fighting finally culminated in 1527 with the sack of Rome by the Spaniard and Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who was devout Catholic. The Italian wars officially ended in 1559, so it started in 1494 and it ended by 1559. So you count the years. The most significant impact of the Italian wars was that they helped expose the rest of Europe to the ideas of the Italian Renaissance. That's so cool. This is how the Northern Renaissance started. Northern Renaissance is when the Europeans, the north part of Europe, started to be very educated, very artistic, very aesthetic. And this is when they gained that perspective after these wars. So the wars actually did great job at the end. So troops returned home filled with ideas they had encountered in Italy. In addition, artists from Italy fled to the north, bringing new techniques and styles with them. So this is how Italy helped European countries to become very aesthetic, very nice. Okay, now we're going to look at Germany. Oh, Germany. So, with the new idea circulating amongst growing populations, peasants, right now, the poor masses, okay, the poor class, the peasants, started to get so frustrated. They were becoming more disgruntled by high taxes and lack of power. They were complaining, but no one was listening, and their living conditions got way, way worse. So, at the same time, Reformation preachers were backing the idea of freedom. Stirred by these factors, in 1524, tens of thousands of German peasants stormed castles and monasteries, a rebellion known as the Peasants' War. Peasants started to say that enough is enough and we're going to take our rights by our hands, so let's burn down everything. So the nobles harshly suppressed the uprising. Martin Luther Gers is this guy, okay, this dude, the theologist. the pastor, the churchman, okay, he wrote, rope and rage and act like mad dogs. So he just accused the peasants that they are mad like dogs, and this is not something nice to say. Luther's refusal to side with the peasants prevented the Reformation from spilling over into a social revolution that encouraged social equality. So the scenario or the scene in Germany was not about social equality at all. People divided, the society was divided, and people hated the Catholic Church and their endeavors regarding the Reformation because it wasn't right. And mind you, that the peasants were all Protestants calling for their own freedom. Meanwhile, Luther was not. Luther was a devout Catholic for the church. Remember, church means Catholic. Causes and the effects of the Reformation. The Reformation changed society in lasting ways. Its causes were complex and the effects were far-reaching. So the causes was that humanist values led to question the church authority. The church was not doing the right thing with the inquisitions and the torture and all of that, so people started to question it. Some clergy were corrupt and worldly or poorly educated, like some priestmen. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just there standing. Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses, and the printing press helped spread the Reformation ideas. Now, the effects to that is that many Protestant sect developed. People didn't like it, didn't like the Catholic Church. Are they going to stand up, not worshiping God or anything? No, of course. They said, let us believe only in the Bible and let us ditch the church because the church is crazy and they're not doing the right thing based on their belief system. So church leaders reformed the Catholic Church. Religious intolerance and anti-Semitism increased, like anti-religion increased. Religious conflicts spread across Europe. So here are the causes and the effects. Now let us go to France. What happened in France? So when I say Huguenots, Huguenots are the Protestants. It's the same, okay? So in France, Calvin followers were called Huguenots. Hatred between the Catholics and the Huguenots or the Protestants frequently led to violence. It's the same war, it's the same topic, it's the same tea. The most violent clash occurred in Paris. Instead of enjoying Paris, they were having wars there. Anyways, so on August 24th, 1572, the Catholic feast of Saint Bartholomew's Day, a down Catholic mobs began hunting for Protestants and murdering them. So the Catholics were hiding, and once they captured a Protestant, they just killed them right away to make the city of Paris all Catholic, free of the Huguenots. So the massacre spread to other cities and lasted 6 months. Scholars believe that as many as 12,000 Huguenots were killed during these 6 months, which is not an easy number. So Huguenots fought for years against the Catholic. The fighting ended when their leader Henry of Navarre became Catholic. So first, let us look at Henry, the leader of the Catholics. Let's have a look at him, just so like you can capture his face. Okay, so Henry was the king of France. Okay, and let us see now the Calvin, who was the leader of the Huguenots. Okay, paste, go. John Calvin. So basically this is him. Okay, so let us continue. So King Henry, who was very Catholic, wanted to end the scene, wanted to end the wars. So he volunteered to become a Huguenot himself, a Protestant himself. So his conversion from Catholic to Protestant or Huguenot led to political stability by encouraging Catholics to accept him as king and as he is. And 1598, Henry's Edicts of Nantes is basically, girls, an agreement that they made that basically said, here it's a declaration in which French King Henry promised that Protestants could live in France and could set up houses of worship in some French cities. So basically, this is what the Edict of Nantes mean. So, anyways, this declaration granted religious freedom to the Protestants, and this is it for the social unrest lesson. So, let us now just view some flashcards. Inquisition, what does it mean? It's a Roman Catholic tribunal for investigating and prosecuting charges of heresy, especially that one active in Spain during the 14th century. Next, what do we have? Heresy. What does heresy mean? It's a denial of church teaching. So basically, it is linked with the Huguenots or the Protestants. Okay, the Huguenots, who are they? They're the followers of John Calvin, the French Protestants. Okay, and then the Edicts of Nantes, we just said that it's a declaration that happened in 1598, which basically the king promised everyone to live in freedom, religious freedom. So that is regarding today's lesson. I hope that you understood everything. Thank you so much and have a nice day.